Welcome to my channel. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, often known as ICE, is a federal agency. It is part of the Department of Homeland Security. A primary role of ICE is to enforce immigration laws within the United States. This includes finding and detaining individuals who are in the country without legal permission. It also involves deporting individuals who have been ordered removed from the country. ICE's work often involves collaboration with other federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies, though the extent of this cooperation can vary significantly from place to place, creating a complex operational landscape for the agency. In early 2025, ICE conducted a significant series of operations in Massachusetts. These actions drew considerable attention from the public and government officials alike. The operations were primarily concentrated in the Boston area, but extended to other parts of the state. The stated goal of these actions was to apprehend individuals deemed to be a threat to public safety or who were in violation of U.S. immigration laws. However, as details emerged, the nature of these arrests and the policies behind them sparked considerable debate and scrutiny, highlighting differing views on immigration enforcement priorities. The operations became a focal point for discussions about the Trump administration's approach to immigration. The administration had emphasized a commitment to deporting individuals with criminal records. Yet the Massachusetts raids brought to light the complexities of such enforcement actions. Questions arose about who was being targeted and why. The impact on communities, families, and the relationship between local authorities and federal immigration agents became immediate concerns for many residents and advocacy groups throughout the Commonwealth, prompting calls for greater transparency and accountability. This essay will examine what really happened during these ICE operations in Massachusetts in early 2025. We will look at the number of people detained and the reasons for their arrests. We will explore the different viewpoints of state leaders, like Governor Maura Healey, and federal officials, such as President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan. We will also review specific cases that illustrate the types of individuals arrested. Finally, we will discuss the rules governing local police cooperation with ICE in Massachusetts, and how these events fueled the ongoing debate about immigration policy and community safety in the United States. The ICE operations in Massachusetts during early 2025 resulted in the detention of a significant number of individuals. According to official reports from ICE, a total of 370 people were taken into custody across the state. While these enforcement actions occurred in various locations, the majority of the arrests took place in and around the Boston metropolitan area. This concentration in Boston reflects the city's status as a major urban center with a diverse immigrant population. The operations were not isolated incidents, but part of a broader federal strategy to enforce immigration laws. These raids were not conducted by ICE agents alone. They involved a coordinated effort with other federal law enforcement agencies. Among the partners were the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. The involvement of these other agencies suggests that some of the targeted individuals were suspected of or had records related to crimes beyond immigration violations such as drug trafficking, gang activity, or firearms offenses. This multi-agency approach aimed to enhance the effectiveness of the operations by pooling resources and expertise. The scale of 370 arrests in a relatively short period in one state naturally drew widespread attention. For communities directly affected, the presence of federal agents and the news of detentions created an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. Immigrant advocacy groups quickly mobilized to provide legal assistance and support to those detained and their families. They also began to scrutinize the conduct of the operations, seeking to ensure that the rights of individuals were respected during the arrest and detention process. The sheer number of arrests also placed a burden on detention facilities and the immigration court system. Understanding the specific objectives behind an operation of this magnitude is crucial. Federal officials often state that such large-scale enforcement actions are aimed at enhancing public safety by removing individuals with criminal histories. However, as the details of the Massachusetts raids emerged, it became clear that not everyone arrested fell into this category. This distinction between those arrested for criminal offenses and those detained solely for immigration violations became a central point of contention, and a key factor in the ensuing public and political discourse surrounding the raids. When examining the 370 individuals detained by ICE in Massachusetts during the early 2025 operations, It is important to understand the two main categories of arrests. The first group consisted of individuals who had been charged with or convicted of various crimes. According to ICE's own data, 205 of the 370 people arrested fell into this category. These criminal charges could range from minor offenses to more serious felonies. The federal government often emphasizes these criminal arrests as evidence that their enforcement actions are targeting dangerous individuals and making communities safer. The second group of individuals arrested, however, did not have criminal charges pending against them or prior criminal convictions that were the primary basis for their arrest by ICE. This group, numbering 165 people, consisted of what are often termed collateral arrests. These are individuals who were encountered by ICE agents while the agents were seeking someone else, or during broader enforcement sweeps, and were found to be in the United States without legal authorization. Their detention was based solely on their immigration status, not on any specific criminal activity they were accused of committing at the time of their ICE arrest. This distinction is critical because it goes to the heart of the debate over immigration enforcement priorities. Many argue that federal resources should be focused exclusively on identifying and deporting individuals who have committed serious crimes. They contend that arresting and deporting non-criminals, including those who may have deep ties to their communities and U.S. citizen family members, is a misallocation of resources and can be inhumane. This group of 165 collateral arrests became a significant point of concern for immigrant advocates and some public officials in Massachusetts who questioned the necessity and impact of these detentions. The practice of making collateral arrests is defended by some federal officials as a necessary part of enforcing immigration law comprehensively. They argue that anyone present in the country without authorization is subject to removal, regardless of whether they have a criminal record. This differing philosophy on who should be prioritized for deportation fueled much of the disagreement between state and federal authorities following the Massachusetts raids. The impact of these arrests on families and communities, particularly when individuals without criminal records were detained, added a deeply personal dimension to the broader policy debate. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey was among the prominent voices expressing concern and criticism following the ICE operations in early 2025. One of her primary objections centered on the significant number of collateral arrests. Governor Healey pointed out that over 100 individuals, specifically the 165 detained solely for lacking legal status, were swept up in these raids. She argued that this seemed to contradict the Trump administration's publicly stated focus, which was supposedly on deporting individuals who posed a criminal threat to public safety. The governor suggested this discrepancy raised serious questions about the true objectives of the operation. Furthermore, Governor Healey criticized the lack of communication and advance notice provided to state and local authorities regarding the large-scale raids. She indicated that neither her office nor local officials were adequately informed about the timing or scope of the federal actions. This lack of coordination, she argued, could undermine trust between different levels of government and potentially hinder collaborative efforts in areas of shared concern, such as genuine public safety threats. Effective partnership, in her view, requires open lines of communication, which appeared to be missing in this instance. The governor's concerns also touched upon the broader impact these raids had on immigrant communities within Massachusetts. She highlighted the fear and anxiety that such operations can instill, potentially making individuals less likely to cooperate with local law enforcement on other matters or access essential services. For Governor Healey, the approach taken by ICE seemed to prioritize aggressive enforcement over community well-being and the nuanced realities of immigrant lives. She emphasized the importance of policies that are both effective in upholding the law and compassionate in their application. Her public statements underscored a fundamental disagreement with the federal government's strategy. While acknowledging the federal government's authority to enforce immigration laws, Governor Healey advocated for an approach that she believed would be more targeted, more humane, and more consistent with the administration's own declared priorities. The deportation of individuals without criminal records simply because they were encountered during raids did not align with her vision of just or effective immigration enforcement, particularly when resources could be focused on those with serious criminal histories. In response to criticisms like those from Governor Healey, federal officials, including Tom Homan, who served as President Trump's border czar, defended the ICE operations in Massachusetts. Homan openly acknowledged that a significant number of the arrests, the 165 collateral detentions, involved individuals whose only known violation was their lack of legal immigration status. However, he maintained that these arrests were justified and in line with ICE's mandate to enforce all aspects of federal immigration law. He argued that being in the country unlawfully is in itself a violation that ICE is obligated to address. A key part of Homan's defense centered on the issue of local cooperation, or, the perceived lack thereof. He specifically cited what he described as limited cooperation from local police departments in certain Massachusetts jurisdictions, including Boston. According to Homan, if local authorities do not honor ICE detainers or otherwise assist federal immigration agents, ICE has no choice but to conduct more widespread enforcement operations in communities to locate and apprehend individuals targeted for removal. This, he implied, inevitably leads to encountering and arresting other undocumented individuals who may not have been initial targets. Homan was resolute in stating that ICE would continue to enforce immigration laws robustly, even if an individual's sole offense was being present in the United States without authorization. This perspective reflects a broader enforcement philosophy within the Trump administration that viewed any unlawful presence as grounds for removal, regardless of criminal history or community ties. The message was clear: federal immigration law would be applied comprehensively, and collateral arrests were an accepted, and perhaps necessary, consequence of this enforcement strategy, especially in areas deemed uncooperative. The federal justification also often includes the argument that all undocumented individuals, by their very presence, are in violation of federal law, and that selective enforcement can be problematic. From this viewpoint, ICE is simply doing its job as mandated by Congress. The debate then shifts to whether those laws, or the manner of their enforcement, are appropriate or effective. Homan's defense highlighted the tension between federal supremacy in immigration matters and the desire of some state and local governments to adopt different approaches to immigrant communities within their jurisdictions, setting the stage for ongoing conflict. One specific case that emerged from the early 2025 enforcement actions was that of Jose Garcia Salmeron, a 34-year-old Salvadoran national. He was arrested by ICE Enforcement and Removal Operations, or ERO Boston, on January 22, 2025, in Boston. The circumstances of his arrest really highlighted some of the complexities and tensions in the immigration enforcement system. Garcia Salmeron was not only illegally present in the United States but was also facing a very serious criminal charge, the rape of a Massachusetts resident. This immediately placed his case in the category of individuals targeted for removal due to alleged criminal activity. Adding to the gravity of his immigration situation, Garcia Salmeron had a prior history with U.S. immigration authorities. He had previously been ordered removed from the country back in 2007, meaning he had already been through immigration court proceedings that resulted in a deportation order. His subsequent presence in the U.S. was therefore a re-entry after removal, which can carry significant consequences under immigration law. His arrest by local police, the Revere Police Department, for the rape charge brought him back to the attention of federal immigration officials. Following his local arrest, ICE issued an immigration detainer for Garcia Salmeron. An immigration detainer is a request from ICE to a local law enforcement agency to hold an individual for an additional period, typically up to 48 hours, excluding weekends and holidays, after they would otherwise be released. This allows ICE time to take custody of the person. However, in Garcia Salmeron's case, the Chelsea District Court released him from local custody despite the active ICE detainer. This decision by the local court became a point of contention, illustrating the challenges ICE faces when local jurisdictions do not fully comply with detainer requests. After his release by the local court, ICE ERO Boston agents subsequently located and arrested Garcia Salmeron. Patricia H. Hyde, the acting field office director for ICE ERO Boston, commented on the arrest, reaffirming the agency's dedication to removing threats from New England communities. His case was presented by ICE as an example of why their enforcement actions are necessary, particularly when individuals with serious charges and prior removal orders are released back into the community by local authorities. It really underscored the federal government's frustration with non-compliance with detainers. Another notable arrest during this period was that of Cristiano Schneider Capdevila Croxado, a 47-year-old Brazilian national. He was apprehended on April 8, 2025 during a traffic stop in Fall River, Massachusetts. His arrest was a collaborative effort involving ICE and several other federal agencies, including the FBI, DEA, and ATFE. This kind of multi-agency involvement often signals that the individual is suspected of serious criminal activities that fall under the purview of these various federal bodies, beyond simple immigration violations. Croxatto was confirmed to be illegally present in the U.S. according to ICE. Croxatto had entered the United States in November 2018 and had violated the terms of his admission, leading to his unlawful status. His criminal history in Massachusetts was extensive and concerning. He had a conviction dated November 19, 2024, for assault and battery on a family or household member. Furthermore, since 2018, he had been arraigned on multiple serious charges. These included violation of an abuse prevention order, receiving a stolen motor vehicle, and several counts of indecent assault and battery, indicating a pattern of alleged criminal behavior. In addition to these charges and convictions, Croxatto had a current and a closed restraining order issued against him. At the time of his arrest by federal authorities, he was also on active probation with the Fall River District Court, a probation sentence that was set to continue until November 18, 2025. This active probation status, combined with his criminal record and illegal presence, made him a clear target for ICE enforcement actions focused on individuals with criminal histories. His case demonstrated the type of profile ICE often highlights when justifying its operations. Patricia H. Hyde, the acting field office director for ICE ERO Boston, stated that Croxatto's actions had put Massachusetts residents at risk. She emphasized ICE's commitment to community safety through the apprehension and removal of such individuals. Following his arrest, Croxatto was to remain in ICE custody pending removal proceedings, which would determine his deportation from the United States. His case, like Garcia Salmeron's, was used by ICE to illustrate the agency's focus on individuals with criminal backgrounds who are present in the country without authorization. The relationship between ICE and local law enforcement agencies in Massachusetts is complex and not uniform across the state. A key point of contention revolves around how local entities respond to ICE detainers. Tom Homan, President Trump's border czar, claimed that Massachusetts had statewide sanctuary policies that hindered ICE's work. However, Governor Maura Healey refuted this broad assertion. She clarified that the situation is more nuanced, largely due to a significant state court ruling that impacts how local jails can cooperate with federal immigration authorities. Specifically, a Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court ruling, Lunn v. Commonwealth, prevents state and local law enforcement officials, including county sheriffs operating jails, from holding an individual solely based on an ICE civil immigration detainer if that person would otherwise be eligible for release from state custody. This means if someone has posted bail or completed their sentence for a state crime, local authorities cannot continue to detain them just because ICE has requested it for a potential immigration violation. This ruling significantly limits the automatic honoring of all ICE detainers in the way federal authorities might prefer. Despite this court ruling, it is not accurate to say there is no cooperation. For instance, the Massachusetts Department of Corrections, or DOC, which manages state prisons, does cooperate with ICE. This cooperation typically applies to individuals who have been convicted of crimes and are serving sentences in state facilities. If such individuals are found to be unlawfully present in the U.S., the DOC will generally coordinate with ICE for their transfer into federal custody upon completion of their state sentence. This distinction is important, as it shows cooperation exists for convicted criminals within the state prison system. The case of Jose Garcia Salmeron, who was released by the Chelsea District Court despite an ICE detainer, highlights the practical effects of these policies and rulings. While ICE views such releases as problematic and a risk to public safety, local courts and law enforcement are operating under state legal interpretations. This creates an ongoing tension between federal immigration enforcement priorities and state-level legal frameworks and policies designed to protect individual liberties or define the limits of state cooperation with federal civil enforcement. The debate over so-called sanctuary policies often oversimplifies this intricate legal and operational landscape. The ICE operations in Massachusetts in early 2025, which saw 370 individuals detained, brought the contentious issues of immigration enforcement, community safety, and intergovernmental cooperation sharply into focus. The division of arrests into those with criminal charges, 205, and collateral arrests for immigration status alone, 165, became a central point of discussion. This distinction fueled a debate about whether federal resources were being used most effectively and humanely, particularly when individuals without criminal records were being removed from their communities and families. Governor Maura Healey's vocal concerns about the raids, especially regarding the collateral arrests and the lack of prior notification to state officials, reflected a perspective that prioritizes targeted enforcement against serious criminals, while also considering the broader impact on immigrant communities. She questioned whether deporting individuals solely for lacking documents aligned with the administration's stated goals. This contrasted with the federal viewpoint, articulated by officials like Tom Homan, who defended all arrests as lawful and necessary, citing challenges with local cooperation as a reason for broader enforcement sweeps in communities. The specific cases of Jose Garcia Salmeron, charged with rape and previously ordered removed, and Cristiano Croxato, with a history of assault and other charges, were highlighted by ICE as justification for their targeted operations aimed at protecting public safety. However, the release of Garcia Salmeron by a local court despite an ICE detainer also showcased the complexities and limitations imposed by state law and judicial precedent, such as the Lunn ruling in Massachusetts, on federal immigration enforcement efforts. These cases became examples in a larger narrative about who poses a threat and how different levels of government should interact. Ultimately, the ICE raids in Massachusetts in early 2025 did more than just lead to arrests. They reignited a profound debate about the soul of immigration policy in the United States. Questions about balancing national security with humanitarian concerns, defining community safety, and fostering trust between law enforcement and all residents remain at the forefront. The events underscored the deep divisions in how Americans view immigration and the role of federal power versus local autonomy, a debate that continues to shape political discourse and the lives of millions across the country long after the raids themselves concluded. Kindly like, share, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more updates.